Scott's with us in Orlando, Florida. Hey, Scott, welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show.
Hi, Miss Ramsey. How are you?
Better than I deserve. What's up?
I am a new listener, and a couple times I've heard you mention how it is bad to lease a car. And my mom, she's leased, I think, 2 of her last 3 cars or something like that. And I was just curious as to why you think that.
Well, leasing is just another form of financing a car. Okay. If you go borrow the money at the bank or go borrow the money from GMAC or whoever, right, or from Lexus Credit, and you pay payments on it, you've borrowed $30,000 for a $30,000 car, and you pay payments on it for 5 years or whatever, right? Okay.
Right.
If you lease a car, you're paying payments on it, and you've got the car for 5 years. And at the end of that time, you either write them a check for whatever's left over, called the residual value, and you get the car, or you hand them the keys back. Okay?
Right.
Either way, you are paying a finance charge on the amount of money you're using.
Okay.
If you're borrowing the money, it's called interest. And you have an interest rate, an APR, an annual percentage rate. There's a truth in lending statement. You may have seen them published at times. That's usually like an 8.5 by 11, and there's 2 big numbers at the top with a big line through them. It covers about a third of the page, and another line, and below the third of the page is a whole bunch of disclaimers, and it tells you what your actual cost of interest is. It's a federal truth in lending statement. When you borrow the money on a car, you get one of those. Have you ever seen one of those? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I actually just
and that's your interest rate. That's your interest rate. So it's 8%, 6%, 2%, whatever your actual interest rate is. On a lease, it's not technically under the law a loan, so there's no disclosure as to what you're paying for the money. Interest is what you pay for the money. In a lease, it's technically called cost of capital. But if you took a financial calculator and you put in there the value of the car, the MSRP on the car, at the beginning of the lease, the residual value at the end of the lease, the payments in the meantime, you can back out what your effective interest rate is, your cost of capital is. It usually comes out around 14%.
Okay. Wow.
And so when you do the actual math on a lease, it is the most expensive way to operate an automobile.
Okay.
That's why it's bad.
Okay.
And you don't even own the automobile. Technically, you're renting it is what it amounts to, right? But that doesn't matter. And you don't you're not missing out on the depreciation, because if a $30,000 car you drive off the lot when you lease it, when you turn it back in, if it's worth 10, you can be guaranteed that $20,000 drop in value is built into the payments that you paid. They're not going to take the loss in value. They're going to hand that to you in those payments. So you don't escape the loss in value, the depreciation. You pay a high cost for the money that you're borrowing, and it's all an illusion. And yet 78% of the new cars that leave the lot right now are leased, because the car companies make more money on the lease than they do on a borrowed deal, and they make a lot more money than they do with a guy like me that pays cash for them and buys it at invoice. And I buy typically right around invoice when I'm buying a car. And so that's the reason. It's just simply more expensive. And, Wall Street Journal, Smart Money Magazine, Consumer Reports, Dave Ramsey, we've all done breakdowns and articles on the lease showing that it's the most expensive way to operate a car. That's why, Scott. Hey, thanks for the call. It's a really good question.